Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Fantasy Football Hustle. I am Brian Drake of FightingChanceFantasy.com, joined as always with my main man, Dwain McFarland of Establish the Run. Want to give a quick shout out to anybody out there who is considered an essential employee. If you're out on the roads, you're going to work, you're listening to our show while you're in a restaurant or you're in a medical facility or whatever you're doing, if you're out there on the roads, we thank you. We appreciate you tuning in to the hustle and getting a little distraction from your everyday lives. We know it's a crazy time out there, so we really do appreciate it. And we've got a great show today. This is a guest who I admittedly, Dwain, spend too much time liking his tweets, and he's going to think I'm a stalker because all he does is put out excellent information. And it's John Daigle of Rotoworld. So welcome in, John. Dwain, how are you today, guys? It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. We're here. We're talking fantasy. And God, do we need a distraction from the real world?
One, you're far too kind. And two, well, actually, it's weird because everyone that, you tweet a lot or whatever, and people notice the people that have your notifications turned on or at least like see everything you do. So I appreciate it, Drake. It's stalkerish, but I do appreciate it nonetheless. Because you notice when people jump out like that. And then, I just wanted to say I appreciate you guys having me on. Both of you, it's not hyperbole. Both of you do so much good and hard work. And at this time, it's just important for people like you to get noticed, that people that might fly under the radar because they don't have a bigger outlet that they're still working towards. So I am more than happy to join both of you. It's truly an honor.
So as Dwain's pounding down his drink up there, what do you got? Usually, folks, we film this at night, not during the middle of the day, so people are cracking beers here. What do you got in that cup there, Dwain?
Dude, it's coffee. Coffee. You made me take a shot yesterday, so today, I'm doing coffee.
I have coffee as well, so don't worry.
The good news is, my new company didn't reach out to me and say, "Hey, we saw you taking shots on Twitter, so you're fired."
Yeah, if you follow us on social media, and we hope you are, I'm at Drake Fantasy. He is at Dwain McFarland, DWAIN McFarland. And of course, you're following both of these gentlemen at Not J Daigle because they're putting out fantastic information that's going to help you win your league. And if you really want to win your league this year, you got to follow us on YouTube. Please go subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Fantasy Football Hustle Podcast. It's kind of our goal for 2020. Dwain and I want to grow the video aspect of this show, and we're going to do so with you following along on the Fantasy Football Hustle.
And by
YouTube
the way,
page.
Quick tip for anyone starting a YouTube page or a Twitter account like I did 10 years ago, don't start it with "not" as the prefix, because that's when you when it's ideal to stay anonymous in this world. Like 10 years ago, now I can't budge off Not J Daigle, unfortunately, because it's kind of glued to me. And somebody else already has John Daigle, and it's impossible to get it from him. I've already tried. So do not do that.
No, I understand totally. Let's keep
we went through that, Drake. We went through our name change. We were the Tuesday Night Hustle, and we're like, right, too restrictive. It's just got to be the Fantasy Football Hustle.
Right.
I had a guy tag me the other day, and he was totally playing off our name, and he was getting tons of people responding to it. I'm like, don't respond to this guy with 3 followers trying to jump on our little train here.
Your bandwagon, yeah.
Yeah, really. I mean, it's not like we're that big.
Yeah, we don't have to be clear, we don't have a bandwagon, but yeah.
We've got a unicycle.
I will gladly steer y'all's bandwagon. Like I said, both of you do amazing work.
So let's get into it, guys. Let's talk a little football here. And I guess when you start talking football in 2020, the first team that really doesn't jump out is the New York Jets. But they just lost their wide receiver 1 in Robbie Anderson. He's going to Carolina. They've added in Breshad Perriman. He, of all 4 starts in Tampa Bay. So we're going to get the ball rolling with the Jets. And as I was looking at this team, guys, I'm like, you know what? If everybody's healthy, which they weren't last year, and they have an offensive line, is this a team that we're kind of dismissing? The Jets are under the radar. You've got an up-and-coming quarterback. You've got a couple of solid receivers now in Perriman and Crowder. You've got a great running back in Bell. Everyone seems to love Kris Herndon at tight end. So the Jets could have something cooking here. So I guess we'll start with the Perriman aspect now that he's coming to the Jets. 1 year, $6 million contract. We know what he did last year in the couple of starts in Tampa, averaged almost 18 yards a reception. I mean, are we buying this, John? Is this really a receiver that you can say, here's my wide receiver one, or does the deal dictate to you what they really think of this guy is? We don't really know. Just prove it to us, kid.
Well, if you recall, it's not just a sample size from Tampa Bay. Like, he actually, in the last 4 weeks, the Browns, just 2 seasons ago, closed the last 4 games with 8 catches, 233 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And more importantly, a 22-yard average depth of target from Baker Mayfield, which seamlessly should transition into Robbie Anderson's role, especially if they're going to use Breshad Perriman as an every down over-the-top threat, because they have no one else playing that role. Like, yes, he got shoved behind once he exited Cleveland, because remember, he re-signed with them on a 1-year deal, I believe, but then requested his release once they traded for Odell Beckham. So that's the only reason he didn't go back to Cleveland. It wasn't performance-based. And then he got shoved behind younger, more athletic, more prominent wideouts, such as Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Justin Watson, even behind Scotty Miller, who Bruce Arians comped to John Brown from the get-go in OTAs. So Perriman got shoved to the 5th on their depth chart and just kind of toiled away at the bottom until finally he did, due to injuries ahead of him, receive that extra opportunity. And what he did with that, obviously, the last 4 weeks with Tampa Bay was wide receiver 3 overall in that span and another 19 average depth of target. So being in this Jets offense now, just because they have no one else to play that role, he does actually transition like as a jigsaw puzzle piece that fits in perfectly. So I actually do kind of like him in this offense quite a bit. Not to mention the rest of the offense you named, Jamison Crowder. Remember, Jamison Crowder showed up involuntarily to the team's OTAs to get ahead and work with Sam Darnold in his first year with the team, and then exited the year with 78 catches and a team-high 24% target share from Sam Darnold in just his first year. So that now, with Robbie Anderson gone, leaves behind 6 targets per game for someone to soak up. Those targets don't necessarily all fall to Jamison Crowder, but the fact he already has rapport with Sam Darnold and proven rapport as well is at least a plus, as opposed to Breshad Perriman coming in and trying to learn straight off the streets. And then Kris Herndon. Kris Herndon is such an easy one. And I'm sorry, I'm talking and not letting y'all talk. I'm going to push it in a second. But Kris Herndon's the easiest tight end to poise for a Tyler Higbee, Darren Waller like breakout, if only because last season was such a fluky set of occurrences. One appearance after season-ending ribs injury, after starting the year with a 4-game suspension, but only 24 years old, and then obviously showed rapport with Sam Darnold, 380 yards and 4 touchdowns in his rookie year, the same time that Darnold came out of college as well, and 13 games together as rookies. So all of them, yes, we were posed a question on Twitter, sneaky stacks, and not to already have spoiler alerts, but the Jets is one of them that you can get at the lower end of drafts.
Absolutely. What's your thoughts on the Jets there, Dwayne?
Yeah, I think number one, I just think about Sam Darnold. So this is good for Darnold. This is not a great core, of weapons, but it's to John's point, each person has a role and each one of them can function, within it. So, Perriman, stepping into the role of Robbie Anderson, he may actually be able to bring a little bit more than what Robbie Anderson brings. Robbie Anderson, one of the knocks on him, is that he really has just been more of a one-trick pony. And we know that Perriman over the last 2 years has been used more as a deep threat. But last year, during that stretch of those games where they really had to lean on him, he showed that he could do more. He had a couple of really good, short catches that he took long. He had a lot of rack yards. So it wasn't all about being a deep receiver. And that was one of the things we talked about last year, Drake, early, was that you saw Adam Gase was really pushing for Robbie Anderson to learn the rest of the route tree and to show that he could operate intermediate, operate short. If you look at the history of Gase's receivers, he truly does want an X type receiver that can do everything, can work deep, intermediate, short, can you get rack, can high point, all those things. Now, easier said than done. Those receivers don't grow on trees, but I think Perriman at this point is more likely to be that guy than Robbie Anderson, just looking at his makeup and looking what he's been able to show once he's finally been healthy. I mean, remember, this guy was a first-round pick. he just had a ton of injuries that derailed his career. He was playing with Joe Flacco at the end of his career. We all have seen really what was Joe Flacco able to support anyway, after, winning a Super Bowl. So I think the Perriman thing is good. I think it's a slight upgrade, for Darnold, because I think he's going to be a piece that they can use more. And he's a guy that I think, I'm trying to think back to last year. I mean, ADP for Robbie Anderson, he was like around 6, 7, sometimes 5 kind of guy. Perriman will probably end up later than that, and he's going to actually have more value. So I think Perriman's a guy that I'm going to like. And if I can get him in 8th, 9th, 10th rounds of drafts, we'll see how far his hype pushes him up, this preseason. But like John said, with it being a team like the Jets, it's likely that value can stay a bit depressed. And so I like that. I also like, the call on, Herndon. If you remember back, and I think Ryan Griffin actually just re-signed with the team, despite some of the issues he's had. He got hurt last year, but during a stretch of games last year, Griffin had in PPR 23. So this week 8, 23 points, week 9, 11 points, week 11, 22 points, week 12, 10 points, week 13, 8 points. So far what we've seen, from Sam Darnold is he's a guy that likes to throw to his inside weapons, inside the hashes, because we already talked about Crowder. Crowder last year put up nearly 200, PPR points, total 12 points per game, had a few big games. His biggest game was 27 points. Then he had another 24 and a 22. So Darnold is kind of like what we see at Kirk Cousins was another guy that was very much like that. I don't know how much we really would comp those two guys to each other, but, thinking about the way that Darnold has shown that he likes to operate so far, I like the call on Herndon. So I think overall, again, like John said, the stack is a sneaky one. It's not a great set of, core players, but they all complement each other very well. So that sometimes works really well. Now we'll see if Adam Gase can just screw it up, and then we'll see these guys all succeed somewhere else in like 2 years. Yeah.
The Jets were a dumpster fire last year. Besides all the injuries, remember, this is a team that started 1-7. They only threw for 300 yards twice all season. So nothing went right.
Yeah, people are jumping on Darnold, but whenever you look at, his average depth of target, what I like is it's still an 8.8. This is a guy that he is willing to push the ball down the field. He's willing to take chances. He's willing to try and win games. Yeah, last year he had 13 picks versus 19 touchdowns. But overall, I prefer to see a guy that's willing to push the ball down the field. What I don't want, and this may be a segue for you, Drake, I don't know, but I don't want like a guy that's got an ADOT of 7 or 6, and that's consistently where he's always at, unless his name is Drew Brees, where he adapted his game and they've built a whole scheme around that and they know how to do that. Overall, I prefer the guys that are willing to push the ball down the field, and we've seen that from Darnold. So it's not like he's just dink and dunk. He likes to operate inside, but it's not because he's just dropping the ball off. So with Darnold, 73% completion percentage on an 8.8 ADOT. Like if you actually do an adjustment, that's a really good number. If you're completing that percentage of passes whenever your ADOT's almost a 9. So I still have hope for Darnold as well.
John, I like where he was going here, setting me up with the guys who don't like to push the ball down the field, because that's, the tag on Teddy Bridgewater right now. Bridgewater, the new quarterback in Carolina, and that's where Robbie Anderson has now found a home with his old college coach, Matt Rule. 2 years, $20 million for Robbie Anderson. But boy, John, this seems like a really crowded receiver group now with DJ Moore, with Curtis Samuel. They re-signed. Who's the kid they just re-signed also to be their 4? I forget.
I'm trying to think as well to be their 4.
I just wrote it down, but Seth Roberts, the architect. Seth Roberts.
Okay. Not re-signed.
So I would say re-signed. I was like, who? Because
that's what I was like too.
Yeah, okay.
I was like, what? Did they bring back Chris Hogan and I missed it?
So you've got them, and by the way, fantasy's number 1 pick, Christian McCaffrey, who will want to catch 100 balls. So, John, let's start with you. How do we dissect this Carolina passing game, and is there enough balls to go around to all these guys to make them fantasy worthy?
So it's bad if you're trying to pinpoint one particular receiver to lead this offense, because Robbie Anderson, as much as he struggled, we talked about Perryman's the past 2 years. He's only had that last month of the season, but arguably those 2 stretches are more than Robbie Anderson has shown throughout his career. Robbie Anderson is still living off in October in 2017 that people value him. But the thing is, he's still explosive enough. Speed alone kills in the NFL. So he's explosive enough to at least make noise. But we haven't got a full season of production from him, let alone even 8 games. So it's enough just to take away and soak up targets from Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore, who are superb wide receivers in their own right. The positive spin, though, is that he fits into the offense, because we talked about Sam Darnold's average depth of target, and I typically work on the fact that average depth of target is a receiver stat barring the absolute extremes. And Teddy Bridgewater happens to fit in those absolute extremes. Bottom of the league last year with a 6.1 average depth of target. Basically, all of New Orleans' yardage in his 5 starts came behind the line of scrimmage, because that's when Alvin Kamara hadn't suffered an ankle sprain yet, which limited him in his ability to elude opposing tacklers. But the fact is, no one runs routes like Robbie Anderson in this offense. So he fits in well enough that he's still an over-the-top threat, but he doesn't impede with what Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore were already doing. So the fact is, if you're trying to get a piece, then likely it is Teddy Bridgewater, especially because he's an afterthought, right? I know you have ADPs in front of you, Brian. So if you just look that up really quick, I believe I had him ranked in my best ball tiers around QB 24 to 26, something like that.
Let me see. I'm on Fantasy Football Calculator. Let's
While you're looking it up, though.
Check that out. I'll dig around.
So you're asking, though, okay, if you can you pretty much can have Teddy Bridgewater with a very bad defense, which allows him to pass more. We think so anyways. And what we expect to be a good offense, or at least a progressive offense under Matt Rule and Joe Brady. And Teddy Bridgewater, given his shallow depth of target, completes passes. And this team has nothing but athletes that can work in space and underneath, between Christian McCaffrey and between DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel, that can open up the field for Robbie Anderson. So unlike Kyle Allen, who was just outright poor and couldn't complete passes, we pretty much know Teddy Bridgewater will complete passes in up-tempo games. And the best part about it is, it's not a stack with Teddy and the Carolina offense that I'm really going into drafts targeting, but it's one that just fits so easily if you have the number 1 overall pick, like in best ball drafts, and you obviously go Christian McCaffrey. It's just so easy to sit back and wait beyond the 8th round for Curtis Samuel, and then in the last round, basically, for Teddy Bridgewater, and just call it a day from there.
Yeah, Bridgewater's ADP is still like off the chart.
Yeah.
On Fantasy Football Calculator. Like, it's not registering at all. And we talked about that a little before the show. Trying to find good ADP data right now is tough. Best ball drafts will really start getting ramped up over the next few months, but it's tough out there now. If any of you guys out there have great ADP data, sure, hit me up in the slide into my DMs, and I'll give you a shout out on the show.
It's just important for Carolina, because you have to weigh the consequences of your stack. And right now, there are no consequences to a Carolina stack at all. Like Curtis Samuel is worthy of that mid-round pick you're going to spend on some of these other guys we'll talk about in a bit as well. So why not him if you already have McCaffrey? And then just your quarterback 3 spot, you just give it over to Teddy Bridgewater for no consequences.
Yeah, I like that in a best ball. Interesting, one thing I just jotted down while you were talking is, John, that you had typically thought about ADOT, as a wide receiver stat. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's something that I've studied a lot with quarterbacks, actually. And Josh Hermsmeyer actually has done some articles on one of the more predictive stats going from college to the NFL has actually been ADOT for quarterbacks. So, I look at ADOT a lot for quarterback. I do think for receivers, there are certain types of receivers that ADOT is very much who they are. I think Robbie Anderson's a good example. Deep threats, they're typically just going to have those high ADOTs. However, what I've seen, with receivers is receivers that, actually have more in their bag than just working underneath or working deep. When they're truly capable of doing whatever it is the offense asks them to do, it's been much more driven by the quarterback, and the scheme. So that's something we may have to come back and revisit, on another podcast, because I'm very interested to hear, your thoughts on that.
Yeah, especially if it's so we're kind of on the opposite spectrums of that, but in different ways, because if you're saying it transitions best, as Hermsmeyer's proven, from college to the NFL, I wonder how it transitions year to year in consistency for players. Like if it is for quarterbacks, if it's sticky whatsoever. Like Robbie Anderson's a rare case that he, in 4 years in the league, his ADOT has never dipped below 13. So it makes sense that he doesn't really mesh outside of deep shots, which is what you'd be drafting him for anyhow with Teddy Bridgewater.
Right. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like wide receivers, I've seen it be sticky if they fit into one of two categories. Either I'm a short specialist, like I work out of the slot, like an Adam Humphries, or I'm a deep ball specialist. The guys that can truly do everything, I've seen it vary more and morph based on the offense and then based on the quarterback. For quarterback, I've actually seen it be pretty sticky overall. Now you can see dips and declines, over time based on, age, like we've seen with Drew Brees, and they've just recalibrated the offense, around him. But, either way, like looking at this offense, I do think there are some really good things about it. One, their defense, I can't even name hardly anybody that's left on the defense. Mario Addison just left. We know Luke Kuechly retired the year before. Thomas Davis left. Eric
They lost
Reed
Poe and Gerald McCoy in the middle of a defense that already ranked dead last historically, like in rushing yards allowed.
So to me, in a way, they just got rid of Cam. They let Cam Newton go. They're potentially Miami from last year in some ways, right? They're kind of just hitting the reset button to me. Now on offense, they do have these three weapons. And again, it's kind of like what we talked about a little bit, before with the Jets. It's not like the best. I would rank this core better, actually, because I think DJ Moore is up and coming. And I think Curtis Samuel is a guy that still just hasn't been completely untapped for a guy that really didn't, play receiver in college. And the strides that he's shown, we had Jay Moyer on last year and we talked a lot about Curtis Samuel, and he highlighted, for our listeners, here are the things that you're seeing Curtis Samuel do that, some of the elite receivers in the league do. So he's really learning how to, even though he's a smaller guy, he's learning how to create separation at the catch point and all sorts of different things. So still a guy, like you said, I love the fact that he's still going late. He's a guy that I want to get. The guy I want to just chat with you a little bit more about, it's the guy I do think is going to, besides McCaffrey, DJ Moore and Teddy Bridgewater, like they mesh perfect. DJ Moore, where he's best so far in his career, is on the intermediate slants, crossers, things like that. He's tough, he's rugged, he's good at run after the catch. Not so great outside and deep, but with a guy like Bridgewater who likes to operate in a timing type offense, likes to get the ball out of his hands as quickly as possible, and is looking underneath. That's great for DJ Moore from a standpoint of, where could his reception totals go? Like they could be really good, but the early ADP data we've seen on DJ Moore, my concern is really how many scores is he going to get in that kind of scheme in a team that we don't know quite what to expect from. And his average ADP right now, Drake, you saw it the other day. It was like mid-second in a PPR format. That's pretty high for a guy that, if I had to put a projection on his touchdowns right now, I would probably cap it around 6 or 7. What are your thoughts?
So, like you said, Moore's an interesting one because we don't have enough evidence just yet. Like, we know out of college, I had him ranked over Calvin Ridley. Both have proven to be as successful as we thought they would be. Ridley, especially because he finds the end zone with ease. But Moore was just a specimen athlete that comped to Julio Jones, except smaller in size. And it's worked out. He finally got an opportunity for a full season last year, and he turned Kyle Allen and Will Greer's combined starts into 8.5 targets per game and an overall wide receiver 13 finish. The issue is that we unfortunately don't have enough evidence just yet that he's a DeAndre Hopkins-like player that can leverage bad quarterback play and still be like a target hog every single week. So we're basically ended up betting on him. And so I actually moved him down with the Teddy Bridgewater signing out of the QB1 territory and into my wide receiver 14 overall, because yes, it does mesh. It's like you said, especially intermediate over the middle of the field. That's where DJ Moore does his best work. And Teddy Bridgewater is so successful completing passes in that particular area. But just adding another mouth to feed in Robbie Anderson, and the fact that Teddy Bridgewater doesn't run. And so therefore I'm expecting more dump offs, even more perhaps than he's ever seen in his career, to Christian McCaffrey. It seems to me like it's going to paint a volatile picture weekly for DJ Moore. So that's why I prefer him in best ball leagues going on right now as a borderline wide receiver 1, because season long, you'll likely have to draft him as your every week starter, top 12. And I'm just not sure he has the ceiling to pay itself off in that.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page. And the big thing for me is the touchdowns. If I'm taking even if I think a receiver's got an upside of 100 catches, and I think that will be in DJ Moore's range of outcomes, it'll just be low probability, right? He would get that high. I like to project like 5 different ways a receiver could get to different numbers. My median's probably going to be like 80 catches, 75 catches, somewhere in there, 5 or 6 touchdowns. If I'm drafting a guy that early, I want a more secure upside of 100 catches, and I'd like to know that he can get to 8 to 10 touchdowns, and I just see that as being a bit of a struggle for DJ Moore. As much as I love him.
Our guest today, John Daigle from Rotoworld. You know his work there, and if you guys need something to do on a Monday morning during the season, I tell you this because I do it myself. It helps me prepare for this show during the season. John and the guys there, along with Josh Norris and all of the great correspondents at Rotoworld, do a podcast where they wrap up every game and they kind of give you the bullet points and the stats and what you need to know from a fantasy perspective. It is tremendous. I can't recommend it enough on Mondays during the fantasy season. You guys do a great work with that. So pass that along to all the folks over at Rotoworld.
Appreciate it.
I want to get your thoughts now, guys, on Brady and Tampa. I know it's kind of been beat to death here, but the spin I want to put is, what are his realistic range of outcomes? So we know what Jameis Winston was doing, right? He was going to throw 30 touchdowns, but he was going to throw 30 interceptions. Can we pencil in Tom Brady for, is this going to be a 35-plus touchdown season with these weapons? Are they going to change that offense to fit Brady? Or are we looking at an offense where maybe they struggle a little bit, and maybe we're at 25 to below touchdowns like that? What's a realistic outcome range for Tom Brady for a guy in redraft this year who's looking to wait on his quarterback, and he's in the 9th round, and here's Brady sitting there staring him in the face?
For me, it's just so tough, and we're all still trying to gauge it. I ended up with him right now as my QB 13, so borderline QB 1, and I struggle to move him as a quarterback 1 because that rushing floor is so important for quarterbacks.
Absolutely.
Like, Kyler Murray played the 4th toughest passing defense, a schedule of passing defenses last year, but because of his high rushing floor, turned it into a top 8 finish, which is why Kyler Murray, the sky is still the limit right now. He can go even higher with DeAndre Hopkins in the lineup. But that's not the case for Brady, right? He has no rushing floor at all. So why would I want to draft a guy like Josh Allen behind Tom Brady just because of the weapons Brady's dealing with? There's no doubt in my mind he can have success in this offense with all the pieces put in place because everything meshes so well with his style of play. But I'm still going in catering to rushing quarterbacks as much as I can just to play it safe.
I don't think any analyst out there could, with a straight face, tell their constituents, if you want, people listening to their shows, reading their articles, the way of the future at the quarterback position in fantasy is you got to find a guy with legs. Mm-hmm. What if you're going to draft 2 quarterbacks? One of them has to be able to run the football because otherwise you're just leaving points on the field. But either way, Brady and Tampa, Dwayne, anything new on that topic for you?
Yeah. So a couple things. One, it's not that long ago that we didn't care as much about rushing, right? And rushing was great. Oh, we like Cam Newton, but we got to count on the rushing touchdown. So it really depends. For me, I'm willing to overlook the lack of rushing versus some running quarterbacks, right? Because there's a threshold I also want from a capability standpoint. I need you to throw so many touchdown passes, as well. So I want to know you got 25 touchdown passes as an easy part of your range of outcomes. And then if you can supplement that and you're a 500-yard rusher and you can throw 4 or 5 on top, you're great. The problem is we have a lot of quarterbacks that'll run for 500, 600, 700 yards, and they only throw 20, passing touchdowns, 22 passing touchdowns. So they really both come back to the same problem, right? It creates what John was talking about earlier with, if you think about the receivers in Carolina, it just creates volatility. So the thing I like about Brady, as I start to think about him, and looking at here are the quarterbacks I would take Brady ahead of right now: Russell Wilson, Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, Ryan Tannehill, Aaron Rodgers, Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, Josh Allen is right there. I'd probably take Josh Allen, over him just because let's see what happens with Diggs. But before that, everybody else, I'm going to go ahead and I'm taking Dak over Brady. I'm taking Lamar Jackson over Brady. I'm taking Patrick Mahomes over Brady.
So how many is that you have listed right now?
I'm taking over Brady.
Yeah.
Or that okay, yeah. So we'll start over. I was kind of going fast there. So I'm going to take Lamar Jackson, right, over Brady. I'm going to probably still go to Deshaun Watson over Brady. You could argue that one, though, with DeAndre Hopkins gone now, right? Because now what's that going to do to Deshaun Watson's touchdown passing total, right? He had 27 last year. I don't have the year before in front of me right now, but it was somewhere around the same range. So if Watson's going to drop down to 22, we're really going to need him to hold his rushing yards intact, which last year was like 470. So you can make an argument.
Which could be the case. He could start taking off and running more because the Cooties and the Stills and these guys aren't winning downfield. So he says, "The hell with it. My guy's not here anymore. I'm taking off and running." And he runs for 800 yards next year.
Yeah,
but they also – sorry.
Watson's an interesting – I was going to say Watson's an interesting case study if only because rock bottom has never been in his range of outcomes, and now it suddenly is. Like,
right.
We don't know.
Yeah, and Drake's right. He could start running more, but they also added another back that you could dump it to, and David Johnson. So, I mean, those could be as quarterbacks get older, they want to protect them a little bit more. That's the other thing that we're going to see with a lot of these guys. We're super excited about all these running quarterbacks. And 4 years from now, these guys won't be running anymore because what happened to Cam Newton is going to happen to them. So it's like this balance, right? Or you have this shorter life period for quarterbacks than what we've been used to, and then the NFL brain trusts are all going to have to figure out how to handle quarterback contracts, which will have to be totally different. But Lamar Jackson, yes. Yeah. Dak Prescott, yes, over Brady, right?
Yeah, of course.
Mahomes, yes, of course, over Brady. Who's your next one? Drew Brees, I'm taking Brady.
Okay.
You could call it a flip, though. I mean, you could call it a coin flip.
Yeah, it's such a small sample, but like Drew Brees averaged 24 fantasy points per game in his 10 healthy starts last year. Like even bucking the road game narrative with a lesser arm strength. Like he was amazing when he started, when he was healthy. Of course, that was only 10 games. Who knows in his age 41 season. So I would never argue someone putting Brees and Brady ahead of Brees because they fit in the same camp. The names I'm going to list to you, let's try this. Carson Wentz.
I'm taking Brady.
Stafford.
Brady.
Matt Ryan.
Brady.
And I have this guy higher than everyone, so I understand, but he gives the legs, and I'm kind of high on this offense. Daniel Jones.
I'm going Brady, but that would be a perfect pair. If I had a deep roster, I'd like to have Brady and Daniel Jones together.
Sure. Okay, so I
but
have
any one of those,
any
of those, though, I would say they're coin flips, John.
Yeah, totally. And I have those guys listed ahead, but yes, it makes sense. I don't get upset. I don't think it's egregious when Brady is over those other guys.
Yeah, and it's because Brady has top 6 in his range of outcomes. Is all I'm saying. This is arguably the best receivers that he's ever had. We've got evidence, even though everybody says he's washed from a deep ball perspective. Really, the data doesn't show that. So I love to watch film, and I do pride myself on getting better at watching film and understanding it. But I'm by no means going to call myself an expert. So I do still lean more on the data. And if I look at his accuracy over the last 4 years, in deep ball accuracy, he ranks in the top 25% of the league for guys that at least attempted, 50 deep balls. So, I mean, he's a guy that even though his arm strength may not be there, he wins in other ways. He knows how to anticipate. He may let go of the ball sooner. It still counts as a deep pass. Heck, Dak Prescott does the same thing. He's not like Aaron Rodgers. He didn't hold on to the ball forever and then go heave the ball deep. Dak, if he sees it early, he can make a good 25-yard throw that then turns into a 50 or a 60. So there's different ways to go about being a good deep ball passer. And he's going to definitely get more shots to do that in this Arians offense. I think they'll kind of meet in the middle somewhere, he and Bruce Arians. You'll see some more short stuff that Tom likes that you didn't see with Winston, but you're also going to see more shots deep. And I get excited, man. It's just hard when you have Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. You potentially have something in O.J. Howard. Let's see what else they do. They're even talking about trying to trade for Julian Edelman. Who knows? But just Godwin and Evans alone, it's just that's really, really strong. When you put that with Brady, I'd be excited.
Brady was still a top 12 quarterback last year in most fantasy formats.
It's crazy.
So it's crazy. Yeah, you never think that. So
I actually didn't even recognize that. That's crazy.
Yeah, I just was kind of scrolling through some of my leagues from last year. I'm like, he finished 12th last. I mean, again, Brees was way down because he missed some games, but
yeah, in your typical leagues, he wasn't. If you had some wild scoring, I mean, he threw.
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at random. He's
22nd. He was 22nd, and it's pretty much standard type scoring format last year. But Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like he was far off from these other guys. Like if you look at his, points per game. So last year we did have, some high scorers, with Lamar Jackson and some of these other guys, and that put distance. But yeah, I think with Brady, it's mainly I just look at the upgrade in weapons versus what he had before.
And that's why, like the three guys I have right after Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Baker Mayfield, and Jared Goff, you wouldn't be happy if you had those guys last year because their points per game, like, yes, they had stretches, most of them schedule-based, but their points per game were miserable. So just the fact that Brady already offers more upside than those three guys, like, you have to take him in that range.
To me, the beauty is once you get past Jackson and you get past, Mahomes, and I put Mahomes first. You got Mahomes, then you got Jackson, and then say you decide you want to put Dak Prescott in, nobody was putting him in that range last year.
Right.
And then say you even like Josh Allen and a couple of these other guys. To me, like when I think about it, if I don't get Lamar Jackson or I don't get Mahomes, who I probably won't take because they're going to go too early, it's just another year where I feel great about waiting, Right. I mean, because honestly, like I like Brady. I don't have to have him over Brees though. If somebody decides they like Brady in the 8th and that lets Brees fall to me in the 11th, great. I'm happy. I'm happy with that. So, and like you said, John, maybe pairing it with an upside guy that's a younger guy that has some legs like a Daniel Jones or somebody like that. Kyler Murray is the other guy that's, going through the roof right now. He's typically the 4th or 5th quarterback taken in some of these early drafts that I've been doing. So I probably won't get to own much Kyler Murray either.
You know a name we didn't mention in all of that? Russell Wilson. And they just keep, he's got receivers out there. The running backs can never stay healthy. That's a guy just every year, people just kind of talk about the best quarterbacks. And it's like, oh, hey, I'm in the 8th round. Oh, Russell Wilson's on the board. I'll take him. And
it just sucks.
It's his coordinator. And it's the fact that when they get ahead, they will totally lean run.
That's the argument. It's never Russell Wilson. It's always those who are for some reason trying to hold him back. Like averaged 15.5 points per game over his last 7 contests. And that was not his fault. It was all because they just didn't rear back and throw at all, even though they were losing running backs left and right. The offense just makes 0 sense.
Who would you guys rather own next year? Who would you rather draft, Kyler Murray or Russell Wilson?
Murray.
Kyler Murray's my QB3. He moved ahead of Deshaun Watson with the Hopkins trade. I mean, like I said earlier, but so it sucks because like Kyler Murray, you weren't getting a discount already before the Hopkins trade. I was doing early best balls in February, and he was still going as the top 5 quarterback because it's so obvious. Like I mentioned earlier, the QB8 overall last year against the league's 4th toughest passing schedule. And now he suddenly adds Hopkins, and they likely shore up their offensive line further in the draft. Like it's the perfect storm right now, but there is no discount. Like he's still going to be the 3rd or 4th quarterback off the board. So there's nothing to bet on except unless he lands in your lap in the right territory.
John, you put out a tweet the other day about some lower key post free agency winners. I want to just quickly get your thoughts on a few of these guys.
Sure.
Let's start. I want to go in LA with the Chargers and Justin Jackson, a name that maybe a lot of the casual fantasy owners don't remember, but Melvin Gordon's gone. They gave all that money to Austin Eckler. Justin Jackson's still there, still kind of the power back mixing in. So give me some thoughts on old JJ.
A big body guy out of college who projects as a player who can lead his team as a bell cow and carries if he was ever given the opportunity. But that's not the reason I'm high on him. And these are deeper guys, by the way, deeper cuts. Because
that's what we love here. We're all about the deep cuts.
Anyone could get on here and say Adam Thielen's a winner and yada yada yada. It's like and Devin Singletary, but no, these are deeper cuts. So Justin Jackson, though, remember, small sample, but the first 3 games for the Chargers last year, Jackson worked as the handcuffed Austin Eckler. And Jackson handled eight touches a game. Now, 8 touches a game doesn't seem like much, but given the projection of this offense, that Anthony Lynn, whenever he coached the Bills in 2016, I believe, with Tyrod Taylor, they took a run-first approach, and that offense led the entire league in rushing yards. Like, I project Justin Jackson with 10 to 12 touches per game, and the fact that he's basically going undrafted right now and has an opportunity, which I love with these last-round guys, with one injury, literally only one injury away. Not everyone could say that, but just one injury away to being a full-time player, but still having value likely in between. Those are the guys I chased. And Justin Jackson has that opportunity immediately now that Melvin Gordon is already signed with Denver.
The Patriots, God only knows what's going on there. To me, this is a complete teardown. Let's go tank for Trevor Lawrence next year. Get rid of any kind of big contract. Let's accumulate some picks and just hit the reset button. But you've listed N'Keal Harry as someone who's a winner in free agency, partly because they don't have anybody else.
Yeah. There is no doubt Jacoby Meyer outperformed N'Keal Harry last year. Like, not even close. And I don't even know if Harry fits in Belichick's scheme. Like, I think out of the draft, this is something Sigmund Bloom said, that arguably there was no worse fit than Harry landing with the Patriots because they just do everything opposite towards his development. However, when a team is rebuilding but not rebuilding, like, they have nothing to lose in giving a first rounder every single rep along the way, because who knows what this offense is in 2 years, let alone in 2020. So they just throw him out there. Suddenly he has a quarterback who at least trusts him more than Brady did. Like, Brady justifiably didn't trust him at all. So what we're betting on now is that they just lend a guy that is going undrafted every opportunity along the way. And so I'll take those, 8-10 targets a game. I'll gladly take those for free.
Here's a guy.
What Harry needs, like, he needs Julian Edelman traded, because where Harry works the best is whenever they can move him around, put him in the slot, and let him catch the ball and then do things with it. Yes, he's not bad as like a back shoulder catch kind of guy, but he really, really, really struggles with press coverage. So it's something that we've got to see him improve at. And for me, like, when, they drafted him last year, the biggest concern was just the fact that Edelman was kind of blocking like the best role you could put Harry in. So if we see Edelman get moved, then I think especially for Harry. Now, of course, we have another big slot receiver there in Mohamed Sanu. So who knows? Like, they have like three of the same guy. They have three slot receivers. So
which
it's
they did by themselves. They made that trade by themselves. So
yeah.
And
so like they are like all kind of blocking each other. But if you see Edelman move along, obviously that's going to push Harry up in the minds of everybody else as well. But to me, then they could start to use him more the way that he naturally wins. Now, having said that, he was a rookie, so hopefully we'll have, knock on wood, preseason. We get through everything we're going through right now so we can watch some of this stuff, because I always have a list of guys, and here's the things I want to see in preseason. It's not so much, I want to see him have 8 catches in this. There's certain things I want to see. And Harry, I want to see, can he play outside? Is he better against press coverage? I'd love to see that. So there's a chance he just matures and gets better. But I do agree. I mean, he's a guy you've got to give more chances.
A guy that I really love, we mentioned him a little last year, and I'm sure there's not going to be a lot of fantasy analysts talking up guys who scored 0 touchdowns last year, but Mo Alley Cox in Indianapolis is an athletic freak. Eric Ebron is now gone. Jack Doyle can never stay healthy. And now we're looking at Cox, who was buried behind both of them last year. This guy's 6'5". He's a big dude. And we know how Phil Rivers likes to target the tight end through the middle of the field. Perfect late round dart, best ball kind of guy. Dynasty League. Some thoughts on Mo Alley Cox?
So I'm in love with Cox. One, because I said that absolutely the wrong way.
Mark the tape.
One, because I'm biased towards the former basketball stars that serve as goal line threats, catching touchdowns. But 2, because Alley Cox, let me get it right that time, actually strategically works as like an optimum best ball pick. And it's because when you shore up your tight end, like, there are 2 strategies in best ball, right? Let's break it down. It's either a first-round tight end, which this year it's Kelsey or Kittle, and none of the above, arguably maybe even just Kelsey, who's finished as the overall tight end 4 consecutive seasons now and is only hitting his prime with Patrick Mahomes. But if you take one of those guys, the whole point is to give yourself a chance, a better chance than anyone else, to win your position at that position every single week. And so there is literally no need. It is a waste of a draft pick to even grab a guy like Gesicki or Jack Doyle, like one of those tight end 14 through 18s, because they're likely never going to outscore your number 1 guy you already invested a top end pick for. So it works out great to grab Mo Alley Cox in the last round. especially for the first round tight end strategy, because not only are you chasing his touchdown upside, but his bye week, which we're looking at, we know with quarterbacks and tight ends in particular, like his bye week differs from both Kelsey and Kittle. So it fits him, like Cameron Brate, those touchdown only guys. It fits perfectly to spin away as your backup from the number one options. And then not only that, but the past 2 seasons with both Eric Ebron and Jack Doyle, the Colts have passed from 12 personnel at the 10th and 7th highest rates. So we know Mo Alley-Cox is going to be on the field. Optimally, they should use him as an Ebron type, strictly receiving passes at the goal line, and just instead put Ross Travis or whoever else they want to throw on for run blocking. But worst case scenario is he's a last round pick that we know has touchdown upside at least a little bit, and we already have an optimum player at that position.
I like that a lot. Dwain and I have always been the show that likes to dig in the weeds and find these kind of BS guys. People are like, who? This guy? We want to be ahead, and that's a great guy to talk about, man. So really cool stuff there. Dwain, John and I are going to talk wrestling here off camera.
Oh, God.
While we let you get into this tweet thread you did about DeAndre Hopkins, which is really smart stuff, super over my head. I hope you're all following Dwain, because he is just laying the smackdown. See, wrestling tie in there.
So hold on, how is this going to work? How we're going to talk? Because I want to hear about the thread as well. How can we do that?
So Dwain, let's Dwain break down what you tweeted about DeAndre Hopkins and his targets per game, and can he keep this up, and the projection spectrum that you have for Hopkins now with the Cardinals, because it's really high level stuff and you're doing a great job with it.
Thanks, man. Yeah, really what kind of spurred it, I just hadn't had time, but I've seen so many people, going back and forth, since the trade. Hey, Hopkins is going to be worth less. Hopkins is going to be worth more. And I kind of have my thoughts around it, but, I like to go dig into these things. So really, to not like waste too much time on it, not to say waste. I know a lot of people care about this topic, but the key to the Cardinals that a lot of people are not realizing. So Vegas moved their win total from 5.5 to 6.5 by adding Hopkins. So essentially they're still saying they're going to be trailing a lot, right? Now they could outperform that, but right now let's just say we assume we take Vegas's word for it. The Cardinals are still going to be a team. They're in a tough division. They're going to get better, but it's not like we're going to see them all of a sudden win 10, 11, 12 games. That means game scripts are going to dictate that they're going to be playing from behind more. Here is the biggest problem for the Cardinals last year. As far as a play per minute, which is basically how you normalize pace, for a team, they were second in the league. Okay. So Kingsbury's offense was very high tempo, just like what people thought it would be. The problem was their time of possession was terrible. So even for teams that were losing teams, so had a negative margin of victory, if you just compared the Cardinals to those teams, not winning teams that are playing from ahead, because you expect to see, them play at a little bit of a slower pace. You also expect to see them win time of possession. For those teams that had a negative margin of victory, so it's mostly just your losing teams, there was this huge range of potential from a standpoint of time possession. And what you saw with the Cardinals is they were the second worst in the league, despite not being the worst team. So there's a lot of room for the Cardinals to improve from a time of possession standpoint. It can be one of those things that when I've gone back and looked at it, it can just be all over the board from year to year to year to year. So it's not something that's necessarily predictive, right? So teams that are losing, you'll still see 30% of those teams on a year-to-year basis actually at least be at 30 minutes of time of possession per game, or a little bit over that. And so when I looked at the rest of the teams that were around the Cardinals, this is kind of the key point from a margin of victory standpoint, is they were actually last in that range. And you saw teams at a 31, you saw teams at a 29, teams that had a 28. The Cardinals were all the way down at a 27. So if you just take that factor alone and say, great, the Cardinals are still going to be trailing. But what if they were just able to get to, based on their plays per minute, what if they were able to just get to, say, 28 minutes time of possession instead of 27 per game, 29, 30, 31. So I took all of those variables and I basically plugged it in, Drake. And then that's how I got to this range of potential outcomes, along with some other things for what it would look like for DeAndre Hopkins. And kind of the silver lining here is that the Cardinals don't have to get way better for them to run way more plays per game. If you look at the plays per game, even whenever the Cardinals were in games where they were leading last year, if you just took those games, Kingsbury's pace would have been 11th in the league. That's actually saying a lot. Usually when teams are winning, they slow way down, and he didn't. So we know that he naturally does want to keep his foot on the gas. And so whenever you take those two things and you put it together, that's how I started to create, some of these projections. And so one, if you were to look at DeAndre Hopkins, and I put out this projection spectrum on him, I think his floor would be as if the team stayed the same, which is very doubtful. For the Cardinals to stay, at a 47, percent, or 27 minutes per game, as far as, their time of possessions, very low that's going to stay. But even if it did, and if you look at the low range of what Kingsbury has done with some okay receivers in his offense, that'd be 7.7 targets per game. For Hopkins, who his last 3 years has been 10.6. His ceiling would be, what if they got up to 40 pass plays a game? So what that would be assuming is if they got to 30 minutes time of possession, if they just got to even, which several teams did that were losing teams last year. Mm-hmm. And then let's say that they adapted their offense and actually targeted Hopkins 28%. That would be 11.2 targets per game. Now I give you both of those because those are kind of like the tail ends of the distribution curve. You're not likely to see either one of those. But I have three other projections, conservative, medium, and aggressive. And really where I see Hopkins most likely landing is somewhere between 9.3 targets per game and 8.5 targets per game. So he's going to see a slight downgrade, in his targets, based on, all the factors that I pulled together. If folks want to go see the whole thread, they can. We've covered a lot of things here in just a few minutes. But the bottom line is the biggest way that the Cardinals could easily help make DeAndre Hopkins worth more than because I'm seeing a lot of people calling him a wide receiver 2. They're like, oh, he's all the way to wide receiver 2. No, that's going to be a struggle. He's probably not going to hit that floor. He's not also probably going to hit the ceiling. I'm seeing some people say he's going to be a slight downgrade from last year. He's still going to be a wide receiver 1. 9.3 targets a game is still really, really good.
You don't finish as a wide receiver 1 from Brock Osweiler and Tom Savage by becoming a wide receiver 2 with Kyler Murray. That's not how logically this works at all.
Yeah. And the cool thing is Scott Barrett had already done a great thread on Hopkins is basically oblivious, to quarterbacks. Yes, the better quarterback does help, but it's basically shown that he can overcome any of that. So that's why I didn't even bother with Kyler Murray. I didn't need to talk about Kyler Murray. All that needs to happen is you just need the Cardinals to not absolutely blow it from a time of possession standpoint per game, because Kingsbury's pace is great. I do think you see Hopkins take a small step back, but it's not like it's not as dramatic as what some folks are making it out to be. It's also not, oh God, just lock him in for what he's always had. Probably also not going to happen either when you take all the factors and you put it together. But 9.3 targets is still really good, and if you put that, times 16 games, you're still going to be in the top 6, 7, 8 receivers.
And I do something called if you look it up, the available targets and air yards tracker at Rotoworld, where I just simplify what you said essentially. And I track players that leave via free agency releases, get traded, whatever the case, and just track how much of that production from last year is available for the guys coming in or the guys that already exist on the team this upcoming year. And right now, I update it every single night. Right now, the Cardinals have because you recall, they actually were starting, if you can believe this, Pharaoh Cooper and Damiere Byrd. Like that was their starting receivers in an air raid attack. And so those guys leaving in free agency may not sound like much, but the Cardinals quietly have the 7th most targets available of any team, nearly a 30% target share, just available for anyone to soak up next year. So with that alone, now you're adding arguably the best receiver in the league, whatever the case, 1A, 1B, him and Michael Thomas. But there's still definitely enough opportunity for Hopkins just to take talent alone and better coaching and better schematic offense and finish as a top 7 wide receiver in my mind.
And imagine now, too, you have a legit wide receiver who can help you continue drives, which last year you really only had the aging Larry Fitzgerald. So now you have a guy who can get first downs for you. What do you know? Time of possession goes up and everything you guys talked about comes to fruition. As we go along here, guys, let's get a quick thought on the XFL was cruising along. They got, 6 games in, I think. And 2 of the breakout stars from that, Donald Perham signs with the Chargers, PJ Walker, who probably would have been the MVP. He's another Temple product. I don't know why we're talking about 2 of them on the same show, but he signs with the Panthers. I don't think great landing spots necessarily for either one, But just quickly with you guys, any shot next year that these guys are fantasy viable? I mean, Perham's behind Hunter Henry, PJ Walker, who Louis Riddick said is going to just straight beat out Teddy Bridgewater. If you saw that on Twitter. I don't know. Thoughts on these two? Anything out there? Best ball, dynasty?
I don't. Man, the world is filled with so much negativity, so I don't mean to bring more of it. I understand it's fun to say that these guys stand a chance at making a run at starting gigs. And I wish nothing for the best. Like, I really do hope they succeed, because that'd be so good for analysts like ourselves. It'd be good for the sport. It'd be good for the XFL moving on. It'd be good for the NFL if it has a feeder system out of nowhere. But I mean, what are the odds outside of camp competition and nothing more beyond that? Walker, what we know about Walker is that he could barely throw to the left side of the field in the XFL. Like, completed just 13 of 32 passes to the left side of the field. He had a 52% completion rate in the preseason for 6.2 yards per attempt in 3 years, 2017, 2018, and 2019, attempting to make the NFL out of camp. Mm-hmm. The good news is Walker got rid of the ball as the quickest quarterback in the XFL this year. The thing is, though, I think we're incorrectly, and I could be wrong here as well. Maybe that is a quarterback stat. But I think I actually attributed that to June Jones's hard-hitting and fast up-tempo offense as opposed to the player commanding it, just because that wasn't the case, that skill set in the preseason from PJ Walker. The good news is, though, for Walker is that the Panthers just really don't care. Like, the Panthers, like we've heard from so many insiders, people who know the offense and the organization, like even they are lost right now and trying to figure out how to go about tanking. So PJ Walker could end up as a backup just by default by signing in the proper situation that doesn't care about the backup quarterback. He can, at the very least, will compete with Will Grier, who was extremely poor in his debut last year.
By week 9, I guarantee we're talking about PJ Walker in DFS lineups because Teddy Bridgewater, breaks his hand or something.
I wish nothing for the best. I really do. I hope they succeed.
Dwayne, anything on those guys, or who cares? No. I love the shirt, by the way. Show that off.
Oh, the hustle? Yeah.
I need to get one of those.
So Parham is the one that I'm more excited about. I mean, he just happens to land on a team where he's behind somebody that's really good. I think for now, it's just, he's going to have to find his way onto a roster. He's battled, over the last year. Now, he's younger. He hasn't had near as much time, but, last year, I think it was Detroit that he was originally with. And I think the Redskins maybe even had him at one point. But what he's shown, again, this is against lower competition. He's definitely shown some traits that could potentially, translate, over to the NFL. So he's the one that I am the most excited about. He's 6'8", ran a 4.67. So not that those things make a guy into a great player, but to me, he just got a great opportunity to learn more, get more playing time, show what he can do. Unfortunately for now, he's behind Hunter Henry, but I think he is a name that, I wouldn't be, totally shocked if in 2 or 3 years in dynasty circles, it pays off, for somebody. But for every one of these that we get excited about, again, it's like what John said, not to try to be negative, but I remember when Rico Gathers, right, was supposed to be, oh my God, everybody's got to have Rico Gathers.
That was me too. I loved Rico Gathers.
Now, his was off the field stuff. There truly was some talent that, Gathers showed. But again, it's the whole picture. There's a lot of things that can derail these players' careers and things. But to stay on the positive, I think Parham is the one that does have a chance. Of course, Hunter Henry, again, another knock on wood kind of situation. That's a guy that's been hurt, a lot. So who knows? He could get an opportunity sooner rather than later. But that's the guy, if I'm in a dynasty league, that I don't mind stashing. If I've got a taxi squad and I'm in a super deep league, he's the guy I'd probably be more inclined to add to my roster.
Rico Gathers, though, was like Raheem Mostert in that he flashed over a number of preseasons, was a clear talent against lesser competition. It just never, ever translated for whatever reason to the NFL, which is fine. He at least was good. The thing about Parham, the strength is he's only 22 years old because we don't know anything about him.
Yep.
I think it actually helps. It was poor competition in the XFL. There's not a single defender that came into the XFL being discussed heavily as a serious threat to rosters.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that Parham was not even a tight end, he was a slot receiver the entire season. Like, that should help, at least just honed his receiving skill set a tad. And we don't know anything about him except he's played in the slot and he's 6'8", 240. So at least we don't have enough evidence to know either way, which is good for him.
If you guys are digging this content, make sure you're going on YouTube, subscribe to our page there, search Fantasy Football Hustle Podcast. We're also on Instagram at FF Hustle and on Twitter at FF Hustle if you want to follow the show there. One of the last things I want to talk to you guys about, Cam Newton's posting Instagram with his shirt off, and he doesn't look like somebody's grandma right now. Saying, they forgot about me, they let me go, and blah, 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 blah. Our friend of the show, Sigmund Bloom, had a nice tweet where he was talking about Newton and Winston and kind of where they should look for 2021 with some potential openings. What do you guys think is the best landing spot for Cam, who just a few years ago was playing in the Super Bowl? This is an NFL MVP. So where would you like to see Cam land in an ideal situation that will further his career both professionally and fantasy-wise for the next few years? Dwayne, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, there's the obvious places, that people would want him to land. Like, if I'm talking for this year, I mean, it's Miami, New England, Chargers. I mean, those are the spots where you have a shot to come in. But if you're talking about, some of the deeper ones, and I think Sig, mentioned this, on his tweet earlier, you kind of come towards a list that's got, Chicago on it. I think he's better than Nick Foles. I think he's better than Mitch Trubisky, if he's healthy. I think he's probably better than Derek Carr or Marcus Mariota if he's healthy. If he wants to come in and let his shoulder rest for another year and then and be on a potentially good team and then serve, as a backup, then you start talking, about the Saints. You start talking about, the Steelers. Those would be great. Yeah, they'd be great options. I think Sig mentioned a few others, but those are the ones that come to mind. So if I'm looking for fantasy value this year, it's got to be one of those first three teams. Mm-hmm. If not, it's either the Bears or Vegas, where I think you could walk in and pretty quickly probably take, the starting job, based on who else. I know it's just hard though, because what those teams have already invested into two quarterbacks, right? But if they were willing to take him on, those wouldn't be bad options. I guess you could also throw in some of the places where you've got young quarterbacks and you're wondering still, are they the answer?
It's an impossible situation for both. I mean, it's still crazy to me. Like, I understand 30 turnovers. That's a huge thing. Like, Jameis Winston, maybe you could win with them. Maybe you can't. We don't know. But like, a 26-year-old quarterback threw for the 8th most yards in a single season in NFL history last year, was available to any GM, and all are still passing until he's a third-string quarterback. Like, that to me is incredible. But again, the 30 interceptions is a very big deal. I know. Having said that, it's just a cocktail of misery for Cam Newton, honestly. He just couldn't catch a break. A rebuilding organization, $21 million left on the final year of his contract, coming off injury, wasn't able to get physicals in team facilities given the COVID-19 outbreak, which just threw a wrench into everything. And now, most likely OTAs and perhaps even camps are going to be canceled leading into the regular season. So it's not like he's going to get to learn a new offense or get to work with a coach in June and July like they normally do. So it's just it's an awful situation to begin with. The Chargers don't make sense given that last circumstance, since Tyrod Taylor's already familiar with Anthony Lynn's offense. The Patriots don't make any sense, as much as I would love to see him there, because him signing with New England doesn't get them any closer in 2021 to knowing whether or not to hand the franchise off to Jared Stidham or Trevor Lawrence. It doesn't help them at all. The Raiders, I think, for Cam make the most sense, as does Jameis Winston. But knowing that infrastructure with Mayock and, more to the case, John Gruden, those aren't the kind of people to sign guys like Cam Newton and Jameis Winston when they already have their sure thing in Derek Carr, who's not a sure thing at all, if you ask anyone but them, and Mariota, who was, as we know, the number one quarterback on Mayock's board the year he came out with Winston. So it's just not a good situation at all for them.
And there's no way Cam, despite the money that he's made in his career, is going to sign some 1 year, $10 million contract to be someone's backup. He's just not going to do that. So
the Bears made so much sense, except that since we all know the NFL is a a good buddy league. Like, it's just everyone just follows each other around everywhere, depending on who they've drank jugs of whiskey with that have the X's on it. Like, that's why Nick Foles fit into Matt Nagy's scheme and Bill Lazor's, like, because he already knows the offense better than Mitchell Trubisky does, which is why he's going to be their week 1 starter.
Yeah.
So it's hard because Cam was an MVP only 4 seasons ago, but it's been a rough 4 years and nothing fits for either right now.
John, what can we expect from Rotoworld in the off season and then as we get into 2020? Got anything fun cooking over there?
Yeah, I mean, the draft is still happening, right? So we still have lots of draft content coming out. Here in the first week or second week of April, we'll start doing every team need, 32 teams in 32 days leading up to the draft, or 32 teams in 30 days, something like that. I got to look at the content schedule again. But either way, we'll have all that. We'll have mock drafts. Hayden Wink is still putting out athletic profiles on fantasy players in particular you can look at to stay ahead of your league. Ian Harditz is still writing columns on fantasy in particular every single week to stay ahead of your league. So the content doesn't stop right now. I'm sure Pat will have rankings as well. My free agency best ball tiers just went live on the site. So you can go and look at all the player capsules I wrote there. 34 quarterbacks, 60 running backs, 75 receivers, and 34 tight ends if you want to look there. And they serve as my off-season rankings as well. It's really not going to stop.
That's awesome stuff, man. Dwain, anything finally from you before we get out of here?
No, man, just appreciate having John on. Covered a ton of great stuff.
Really quickly as well, I just wanted to say, I put out this tweet a few nights ago, but I want to reiterate it here because right now,
yes, I know what you're going to say. I had it written down. I have it written down right here, and I forgot to get to it. Go ahead.
We were talking before the show that right now our emotions vary. Some people are home with kids, some people aren't. But either way, it's a struggling time. We're all caused grief for different reasons. And I just want people to know that, like, it's okay. And it took me probably last week to accept that. I didn't think my grief fit in with everyone else's, but it's okay because everyone I've talked to, everyone's grieving in a different way, and you don't have to have a reason to grieve. I don't know many ways to give back, honestly, and I'm probably not even fit to give back in this way. Like, there are much more optimal candidates to do so, but all I can do right now is basically allow you to help me help you. And so in doing that, if you have something you've written sports related, or we can even unhandcuff that caveat and just go not sports related. If you've written anything, if you plan on writing or just want to write to take your mind off the world, like, I've opened my DMs, they're still open and will remain open to everyone moving forward. So anyone, like, I urge you, seriously, jump in, send me everything. I've already been editing Google Docs and small paragraphs for people. If you want to write about anything at all, this is the service I'm offering to people. So it helps me, and I would think it helps you. And if we're taking our mind off of these things altogether, then hopefully we can get through it however long this lasts.
That's awesome, man. Really cool stuff. Quickly, we did get a comment in our chat room, so I don't want to ignore these guys. The last thing we'll talk about today, what are the outlooks for the Bengals skills players based on either Dalton or Burrow starting, which obviously will be Burrow. So
that's another guy, by the way, on the outside looking in is Dalton. The Bengals, they're just so bad at business, but they definitely didn't gauge the market properly whenever Nick Foles, with a $15 million cap hit, guaranteed salary for the next 2 years, can get a 4th round pick or whatever. Like, you're obviously not getting much from Dalton when they know the Bengals don't want him at all. Burrow comes in, and I wish they hadn't have spent so much on good players in free agency on defense, because if we got that atrocious defense again with Joe Burrow and the caveat of the mixture of athletic receivers they have, it would have been something special. So I do worry about them suddenly being able to stop the run with DJ Reader and having a secondary also. They have 2 safeties now that both play inside the box, and Von Bell. And so, they can actually, I would imagine they can actually stop the run now, which is odd. But I am on Tyler Boyd for his consistency, if only from the slot, and John Ross as like a splash player in the late rounds of drafts. My rule typically is to avoid injuries. And the fact is, we haven't seen AJ Green play. Like, he's played 8 games, 9 games the past 2 seasons. So I will be avoiding AJ Green for better or worse. That's someone, though, who still is being weighed as like a wide receiver 30 to 32 range that I don't mind losing out on if I lose out on him. I'd rather him succeed and me not have anything than the probability of him failing and me going overweight on him. So unfortunately, I will not have any AJ Green, but Joe Burrow stacking him with other surrounding ancillary weapons with the Bengals, I don't mind at all.
Yeah, I think, for me, Burrow's going to be an upgrade from a standpoint of probably what you're going to see big play wise. So I think that's exciting. Obviously what the Bengals did on defense does make them a little better. I think that was all really aimed at, being in the same division as the Bengals. I mean, in the same division as the Ravens, and having to deal with stopping that, juggernaut from a run game standpoint. Although I don't know how much your run stuffing defensive tackle is really going to help you against Lamar Jackson. But anyway, that's another conversation for another day. But yeah, I think overall I see it as an upgrade with Burrow. It's not that, Andy Dalton deserves more credit than he gets. He's actually, if you look back at his history and the number of different receivers that he's actually supported that have been fantasy viable, they've been good. But when I look at what Burrow can do as far as stretching the field and getting more vertical and then being able to, I think, really open up the offense from a standpoint of the coolest thing I like the most when I watch Burrow, and I've actually had a chance to watch quite a bit of his tape now, is just he was a little bit in the championship game, but he's typically just not phased. He's that guy that can handle the pocket. He doesn't mind if there's pressure coming at him, wherever it's from. And he's still looking and he's keeping his eyes like not just downfield, like way downfield. Like the guy's always looking for the big play. So I think from a fantasy perspective, what's that's going to mean for him in his rookie season? He's probably going to throw more touchdowns than most people think. He's also probably going to throw more picks, because he's going to have to learn what throws he can and can't make. But I think overall it's going to be a slight uptick, for the Bengals offense overall. To John's point, we'll see how far it can go. The defense did get a little better. I will say one thing about defenses, man, and I've studied them a lot over the years, is we've seen so many teams year after year after year sign all these defensive players and it just not pan out and teams just be terrible, So I put a little less weight into it, than I used to, actually quite a bit less weight. But I think overall you're going to see a slight uptick, with Burrow as the head of the offense. And I am excited about Joe Mixon. I must
say Joe Mixon is the winner here, no matter what.
Yes.
Because we know yards after contact per attempt is a sticky stat that transitions with running backs year to year. And Joe Mixon averaged over 3 yards after contact per attempt as the overall RB11 in fantasy, behind that awful O-line that's now getting Jonah Williams and whoever else they add in 2020. So Mixon, like the sky's the limit for him this year.
Absolutely. AJ Green is, we know from this show, he's on my do not touch list. I'm not dealing with guys who have the bad foot and the bad ankle at that age. I'm not, Drake, unless you're way down the line.
What is his ADP? I don't even know.
I closed the tab already.
All right, whatever. Yeah. Like there's a point where I would start owning shares. I would just, I'm not, if I were to have 50 best ball teams, even no matter what his price, I'm just not going to own him a bunch. But there is a price where, I would start to consider AJ Green. It'd have to be like 6th, 7th round though, before probably somebody else is going to pull the trigger before me.
Yeah, this is not his ADP, but I have him as my wide receiver 38 right now. Turns 32 in July, and he's playing on a franchise tag, likely playing, that even he's come out and said he doesn't want to sign. Like he doesn't want to play on a franchise tag given his injury history. So it's just it's a situation I just, would prefer to avoid.
We hope you guys don't avoid our YouTube channel. Go over there again. Check us out at the Fantasy Football Hustle. Follow us, subscribe, and go over to YouTube or iTunes. I keep saying YouTube. Go to iTunes. Give us a review. We'd love it. 5 stars. Tell us how great we are and all that good stuff. But John Daigle, Rotoworld, thank you so much. Excellent hour of football talk. We appreciate it. And everybody else, we will see you guys soon. Stay safe out there. Stay home. Listen to some podcasts. Take it easy, guys.